How's it going, lazy Bruces? I'm Sixkilla. Welcome back to Sekimeiya. We are Shiroya hanging outside the Ashiya Tower waiting for it to open up. It seems like she expects it to open earlier than it actually is, almost exactly like how it was when we were standing outside Ina Cafe, when she expected everything to open but nothing was. It seems like she's on a weird time schedule that no one else seems to be following, or her watch is wrong or something like that, I don't know, but she just can't seem to get mornings right, you know what I mean? But I can feel that. I never get the mornings right either. Let's get back into it, shall we? 6:50. I've been there for an hour, and not a thing had changed. It's very dark for 6:50 in the morning. I blanched at the thought of waiting there for 2 more hours, but the longer it went on, the sooner I thought it had to end. The night had stretched out for so long that my eyes were beginning to close on their own. I just wanted to lie in my bed. The last stretch would not be any easier on me. Soon Ina would open. There was no way I could walk there. The temperature inside the tower was regulated, and that was where I needed to be. We were going to freeze to death standing outside this tower. The same wait continued until 7 o'clock came. The time I'd spent could have been summarised in a blink, as each second had been identical. When would something happen? I wanted to sleep and know where the Sekimeiya was. I just needed to step into the tower, but why was it not open already? I'd hit the point of a real pressing fear. I couldn't think straight. The small plaza was the only illuminated place I could see, and I had to be close to the entrance as I could. I looked up, but I couldn't see anything past the dark, monolithic slab of the building. I hadn't moved in so long that turning my head was painful. I had to do it slowly, but I managed to see the stars. Wait, am I crazy? It was the same starry sky. Just like everything below it, nothing had changed above. What? This doesn't make any sense. Where's the sun? I stared up with wide eyes. The dark sky looked just as it had when I'd left my apartment. Then, speechless, I looked back at my phone. 7:04. I don't understand. It's like the world has stopped moving. No service. Why? Why does my phone have no service? I'd witnessed the sun rising from behind the mountains countless times, but at that moment, no hint of darkness peeked out from over them. It was 7 o'clock already, so why was Yushibana still covered in darkness? I felt that time might not have been passing since I'd leaned on that streetlight. Astonished, I forced myself to step forward and spun. Nothing at all had changed. There was no meaning that I could think of. After all, no matter how certain I felt, it was impossible that everything had just stopped. Inevitably, the sun would rise, obliterating the night. But with each second that seemingly passed, the more I doubted any had. I'd spent what seemed like eons, convinced that the lights in the lobby would turn on at any moment, and they still hadn't. What was I waiting for? The tower should have opened already. Without a doubt, the sun should have begun to rise already. It's like the sun went out again. Waiting had become my only protest, but time staunchly refused to advance to the next turn. There was nothing else I could do. I wanted to fall back into my bed and feel the warmth of my apartment, but my legs wouldn't be able to carry me far from that undefined plaza. 2 days before then, I'd also felt like the world had something wrong with it, but everything had solved itself in the end. Was the same thing happening again? How long had I waited then for normalcy to return? There was no way I was in the wrong. Like I thought the other day, nobody was there. Everything felt still, and it had ever since I'd arrived. I was alone among nothingness. The light above me was a star, and everything for light years around was the void. I hugged my body even tighter. I'd been convinced the cold would end at some point, but it continued without end, eroding me. Would 9 o'clock be no different? I could no longer tell myself it was impossible. My eyes remained locked to the sky. I was terrified, desperately wishing that I was back at my room, but simultaneously overcome with curiosity. Both of those conflicting feelings locked me in place. It didn't make any sense. Where was the light, the people, or the real world? Travelling through time with the Sekimeiya, as insane as it had been, was at least clearly travelling through time. I had no idea what I was experiencing in front of the tower. It had no name, no concept. I had to go back home. Even though I felt almost unable to walk, it was only a few minutes away, and every second I waited, slightly reduced the energy I had to go back. Even so, I was hypnotised by that unchanging sky. Was there an explanation behind the state of the world, or was it another question without an answer? Time was certainly advancing, but I couldn't make out even a hint of a white outline. The sun was nowhere to be seen, not the faintest trace of it. If the world had frozen, would it ever unfreeze? If so, then the next question was whether I'd get to see that happen. I couldn't believe my legs were still supporting my weight. I couldn't believe it. There was nowhere to sit except the slick ground itself. Wanting to confirm how much time had passed, I painfully lowered my neck to look at my phone. 7:30. No service. That time, I slowly moved my finger up to the call button. It was freezing, but I still registered my touch. The moment I pressed it, I called my mother's number. A quiet robotic voice came out of the speaker. We couldn't connect to the line. Immediately, a beep played, indicating that the call had been cut. I entered something like a state of shock, unable to move the phone away from my ear. Something was very wrong. I could no longer believe anything else. The place I was at the moment was not the real world. You're in that world like the story, where time doesn't pass for 100 years. I'd gone back to looking at the sky. Where could I be if not in the real world? Was I in a dream? After I'd finally fallen asleep on that soft carpet? Usually, verifying that would have been very simple. However, as I could hardly feel my skin anymore, even after pinching my hand, I wasn't able to conclude it was reality. No, it was reality. The minimal sensation had been enough to confirm that. When we'd been in the tower, I felt almost the same way regarding how dreamlike everything was. Was there then an explanation behind the unmoving world? Who could possibly interpret anything about that explanation, if it existed in the first place? Hadn't I been the only person to notice it 2 days earlier? After all, it felt as if I was the root cause. The world wasn't permitting me to enter the next day, even though it already should have started. If that was it, was there anything I could do? There were precisely 0 ideas that came to mind about what was happening to me, or how I could resolve it. And there was no fleeing either. If abandoning the idea of going to the tower would advance everything to the next day, there was no solution. I could still somewhat feel my hand. What was clear was that staying still was getting me nowhere. Still gripping my phone, I took it out. Again, according to it, time had definitely begun passing. It showed 7:35. Making sure I could still move my legs, I stepped closer to the building. Immediately, the bricks that formed the front wall became visible. The lobby looked as it had earlier. The tower just as unchanging as its surroundings. I stepped to the left, trying to make out the reception desk. Even though it was very dark, I'm sure nobody was there. I had little to no force left in motion, but I grabbed the handle again and tried to push. It didn't budge at all. The Sekimeiya was close to me, somewhere behind that door. If the world had frozen in place, wasn't it the perfect opportunity to obtain it? I couldn't sense a single living thing anywhere, so there was no need to devise a plan. I just had to find the Sekimeiya and hope that after using it, things would fix themselves. So I continued stepping away from the door until no light remained in front of me. I walked forward, following the rough wall with my arm. It continued for a short while, but I soon lost it. When that happened, I turned to the right and something cold hit my shins. It was grass, covered with snow that I shook off before it could stick to me. Then, I put out my right hand and walked ahead, tracing the wall with my bare fingers. I'd gone around to the left side of the building, having considered the possibility of another way in. Going to the storeroom wasn't the only way to determine if that door was really connected to the outside. It was completely dark and the surface of the building was like a block of ice. However, if there was a door somewhere in it, I believed I could find it. Would I be able to open it if I did? It didn't sound likely, but there was a chance I could enter, and I no longer feared the possibility of someone seeing me through the cameras. Staying outside was far more intimidating. I really was exhausted, and the tall grass made the path harder to get through. However, as it was fully dark, I had to be very attentive. With my forefinger, I slowly traced a line through the wall, attempting to discern the thinnest gap that could have outlined the door. The cold surface was uneven and bumpy, so I rapidly lost all hope. If there was a door somewhere, I wouldn't find it so easily, even though I could roughly tell where the storeroom was. As I walked, the fear of passing out began to grow inside me. Out of nowhere, the wall entered, and I found myself at the back of the tower. In front of me, I could no longer see the stars, as an invisibly dark mountain extended just ahead. I turned around and felt the wall again with my left hand. Eyes closed, I started to retrace my steps, feeling an awful mix of negative emotions. But I suddenly stopped when I remembered something from the day we'd been inside that immense building. If that door had really led to the wall that I was at, there was a way I could find it. I tried to forcefully press my hand against the wall. Naturally, nothing happened. If a door was there, it must have been made or covered with the same bricks as everywhere else. However, when we'd been in the storeroom, we'd shaken the door from the inside and it had made a rattling sound. If the other side was the wall, then shaking it from the outside should have produced the same sound. With no light bulbs around, all sound had disappeared. and during the winter, it was rare to hear insects at night, but the silence felt far too unnatural to be justified. I took one step forward and softly hit the wall with a fist. All it produced was an instant, dry noise, and no part of the wall moved in the slightest. I recalled the width of the door, and that I must have been close to the storeroom. After the next step, I repeated the same tired motion, and the result was identical. Then I stopped again and hit the wall. Was that it? The sound had been different. To confirm it, I hit the same spot, trying to apply a bit more strength that I wasn't sure I had. The sound I heard was different. Speechless, I extended my arm to the wall and pushed. When I did, I felt it move. What? Did I open it? After so long, that was what made my heart speed up. I felt the edges and confirmed the outline of a door. Arcado had been right after all. That door to the storeroom was all that had blocked our way out. I'd got it to open easily by pushing it, however, it had opened inwardly, which is why we hadn't been able to do it in the storeroom. I stepped toward the door. I couldn't see a thing, but when I felt the inner walls, I immediately identified them. I was back in the storeroom, on the tower's crystal floor. But I couldn't move. The fear of someone being in the security room resurfaced. If I walked forward and got caught, that could have been the end of everything. The door was covered by bricks, and its gaps were incredibly thin. When I felt it from the inside, I noticed something very important. Oh, there's no handle. It was already gone that morning. More importantly, that meant that if I closed the door, I wouldn't be able to open it from the inside. I walked deeper into the narrow entrance, leaving it open. There hadn't been much wind outside, so I didn't think it would close on its own. Immediately, I hit another wall. It was the partition that concealed the area I was in. It was in its regular position, separating both sides of the storeroom. I put my hand on it and felt it around the right edge, where the opening mechanism was. From that side, the little aperture was noticeable to the touch. When I dragged the wall open, however, I couldn't see any difference, as there was no light beyond it. I took another timid step and felt a soft texture. I really was in the storeroom. What I was making contact with was the damaged couch we'd seen next to the wall. I couldn't see anything, but the door to hallway A must have been in front of me. Was it open or closed? While I couldn't know that, what I did know was that the lights were off on the other side. There was no camera in the storeroom, but as soon as I opened the next door, I would be recorded. The question was whether the security room was vacant or not. I didn't know what to do. Of course, there had to be someone in the security room, but there simultaneously couldn't be. The world had frozen. What would happen if I was seen? I couldn't claim to have randomly found the hidden door, but the chance I had was perfect. The tower seemed lifeless, so I could find the Sekimeiya and leave. If it was true that nobody was there, I could even set off the alarm and let the Sekimeiya store time for 12 hours, as there wouldn't be anyone in the security room to complete the deactivation process. Ultimately, I'd reached my arm toward the door. The day would evidently never begin, so between attempting to walk back home and trying to obtain the Sekimeiya, the decision had already been made. I found a metallic knob and turned it. Once more, after opening a door, the darkness persisted. I couldn't see hallway A, but I knew I was there. I was immediately certain that I wasn't in a dream due to my senses. It was the smell, the same strange smell that had characterized the building on that long day, tinged the air again. But I knew it wasn't the scent of the building itself. On the evening of the 15th, I'd identified the real source. The Sekimeiya. When we'd been close to it, the smell had strengthened, and when we'd been further from it, it had always been weaker. As I'd thought, the Sekimeiya must have been there, somewhere in the building, and going off the intensity, it was close. I hadn't taken another step into the hallway, but I'd been there for some seconds, and nothing had occurred. Then I realised that my impression had been incorrect. After opening the door, there'd been a subtle change I'd taken a bit to notice. A tiny green light could be seen high up, slowly flickering. It belonged to a security camera. We never learned the true meaning behind those lights. Did they indicate that I was being recorded or something else? Was my figure being displayed in the security room? Everything was cold and still. The only remaining movement was from the inanimate light. The security room had been soulless, but I couldn't believe it. Even though that belief was close to proven, I couldn't accept it. Slowly, I began to take silent steps toward the metallic door. An occurrence from the 15th was repeating. In just the short time I'd been there, the smell had blended in, becoming harder and harder to notice, despite its prior strength. First time we noticed the smell, wasn't Katai confused about it too? But if it came from the Sekimeiya, he should have smelled it during the previous 2 weeks. I hit the wall at my side, failing to walk in a straight line. Carefully, I continued to move until I felt a doorknob. It was a security room, so I gently gripped it. I'd seen it with my own eyes. Was nobody on the other side? It couldn't be. Ashiya had been anticipating Shin's attack, so why would nobody be stationed at the cameras? But I knew that the room would be empty because I hadn't been seen. When I slowly opened the door, nothing but darkness waited for me. There really wasn't anyone inside. I knew there were many monitors in front of me, but none of them were on. It was unbelievable. Why had all life vanished from the world? Why had all the surrounding lights gone dark when electricity still flowed? I walked into the room as I recognized a red light near the floor, doubting whether the button it belonged to still functioned. I reached out and felt around in front of me. When I touched the chair, I moved aside and crouched next to the light. I pressed the button softly. A whirring sound came from my side. Following it, one of the screens turned on. The computer had powered on and a single monitor displayed a loading bar. At last, I could see the dim walls around me, the blue light projecting onto them. Without a doubt, I was the only person there. Soon the bar filled, and was replaced with an authentication screen. I remember that Katai had entered a long ID and password, so there was no chance I could access it. I'd confirmed I was alone. As ridiculous as it seemed, I was about to walk out when the messiness of the room caught my attention. The objects on the desk were scattered around and almost all the drawers were partially open. What had happened? On the 15th, when we stepped inside for the first time, the room had looked considerably different. Had someone tried to find something? I began to feel uneasy. Oh, this is... Glancing at the many open drawers, I saw something next to a pile of files. I pulled the heavy compartment open and tried to reach the bottom with a finger. A brown key, large and rusty. After putting it in front of the light, I confirmed it was the one I suspected. It's the key we found on the floor of hallway A. We later thought it could have been for the storeroom door, and it was in the security room. There had been a few reasons to think that the person who dropped the key could have been one of the culprits behind the attack. And at that moment, when it was essential for the cameras to be monitored, nobody was in the security room. Was there a reason after all? Could the frozen world have merely been an illusion? There were many things that made me uneasy, so I walked to the door. My breathing had begun to accelerate. The key was still in my hand. It might have been an essential part of the culprit's plan, so I took it with me, accepting that the past could change. If there was no copy of it, it wouldn't be found in hallway A anymore, and the entire attack had failed depending on its importance. I felt around the lobby door until I found its knob. I could see a red light by the reception desk, but it wasn't enough to illuminate the lobby, even with the streetlights shining faintly from beyond the glass. I questioned it again. Why was the entire floor dark when I'd been able to turn on the computer? From the inside, the exterior door wasn't fully transparent, but it was enough to see that the sun hadn't risen yet. It seemed entirely futile to think about that. But if there really was a reason behind it, the mirrored stillness of the tower could have had the same cause. I could attempt to grasp it from that angle. Disoriented, I walked across the smooth floor with my arm out. Where was the Sekimeiya? If Ashiya's intent was to make Shin break open the cabinet, it couldn't be well hidden. There was a room below me. There had been nothing in the storeroom, so the mechanical room was a place where the cabinet could have been kept. But more importantly, I knew that the light breakers were there. There were no switches on the walls, so if the breakers were on, I'd have no idea why the tower was still dark. I followed the surface of the desk around, then I searched across the wall until I'd taken hold of a door. A tenebrous staircase led down from the other side of that door. I descended it, carefully placing each of my steps. It wasn't as narrow as I recalled. The cabinet could have been there. After I made the sharp turn below, I felt the following door, which I accidentally opened with my knee. The bulb was no longer emitting any light, but the difference was minimal. I knew the space was filled with furniture, so I gingerly stepped on the wall with the circuit breakers. I hit the plastic panel with my arm. Naturally, I couldn't see the state of the switches, so I hoped what I had at hand would be enough. I took out my phone and placed the screen in front of the panel. The breakers were right behind it, so the faint light was enough to let me see in the direction they were pointing to. I slowly panned the phone across the plastic surface, taking a look at all of them. They were all pointing up. So like with the sun, there was no reason behind the lack of light within the tower. It didn't make any sense, but I put my phone away and reached my arm back up. When my phone had hit the plastic, I heard a metallic sound. As the ceiling was very low, I had no problem reaching the top of the panel. Two cold objects were there. I grabbed them with 2 fingers and opened my palm. Even though I couldn't see anything, I could identify their shape. I took my phone back out and directed its light at what I was holding. 2 more keys. Once they were illuminated, I recognized them as well. Wait, this is the attic's. But that wasn't all, because the other one was unmistakably the Sekimeiya's cabinet. I just have to find the cabinet then. I can just unlock it. I don't have to break it open. Why the hell had those keys been there? Both of them should have had few or no replicas and been very carefully protected. Nothing made any sense. How many mysteries layered around the Sekimeiya? I began to question what to do. I have to hurry and find the cabinet, but then what? I should try to trigger the alarm or just... Should I try to trigger the alarm or just silently unlock it and take the Sekimeiya? I've been recorded by the cameras, so even though I have the cabinet key, shutting down the tower might have been the best idea. However, anyone who knew about the secret door could have entered at any point. If the rusty key is really for that door, I could try to lock it from the inside. But then we wouldn't be able to get back out. I tried to move, but the obstacles in the room didn't make it easy. Could the cabinet have been there? Well, it seemed like a good place. Neither the lobby nor the mechanical room had cameras. There were chairs and tables on the floor, so I had to move some aside to get to every part of the room. Even though nobody could have been there, I kept trying to be silent and failing as I scattered things that I couldn't see. After a while, I knew the cabinet wasn't there. I had no idea if I needed to hurry or not, so I went back up the staircase without wasting any more time. I stepped back into the lobby. Where would the Sekimeiya have been? There were a couple of places I knew to prioritise over others. I walked to hallway B, hitting the hard column with my shoulder. The green lights on the cameras are still there, but my legs moved automatically, recalling the steps needed to reach the place called the event room. Was it set up as it had been on the 15th? Finding out would be simple, and if the cabinet wasn't there, my last idea would be in the room in front of it, B4, where the cabinets with temperature regulation were. After I'd taken a few steps, I turned around. Through the door I was peering back into the lobby. What? My heart sped up all by itself while I scrambled to understand why my vision was completely blank. I could see nothing but darkness, and that didn't make any sense. Because from there, I should have been able to see the lights at the reception desk. What happened? I closed and opened my eyes a few times, wondering if I was the problem. There it was. Stunned, I stared at it. I hadn't moved at all, so I was very confused. I really wanted to doubt my eyes, but the light had suddenly come back. And even though I could see it beyond the door, my heart hadn't slowed down. It was the same sensation as when I turned around while being tailed in the snow. There was only silence. I backed away slowly without taking my eyes off the light. And eventually, the wall covered it as I kept approaching the door at my right. I found the doorknob and opened the way to the bridge between the hallways. It was cold. As soon as I took a step in, I perceived a decrease in temperature. What is this? I couldn't believe I was able to feel any colder. However, after opening that door, the change had been instant. As I approached the place where the cabinet had been, the temperature continued to decrease. It is here. In the middle of the wall, I felt a cold touch of a curtain. I raised it as fast as I could, forcing my hand into a claw grip. And when it was out of the way, I didn't have to wonder what was behind it. There was a faint glow, making the crimson temperature beneath it visible. I couldn't believe it. The Sekimeiya was there, but what had happened in that place? With my free hand, I reached it to verify the cabinet was open. As I thought, the glass wasn't properly closed. That must have been the reason behind the temperature. I had to decide what to do, but I couldn't think straight. I had the Sekimeiya at hand. I didn't even need the key that I'd found. I felt the glass with my hand. The gap wasn't big enough to get through, so I tried to scroll it further down. Huh? I couldn't move it. It seemed to be stuck in place. Why is it not opening? It can't be locked. I kept applying force and noticed that it was moving a little. Before I could reach the Sekimeiya though, I let go of the glass. What's that? I stared at the cushion around the Sekimeiya. My first impression had been mistaken, as it wasn't just crimson. Was that white? It appeared to be stained by a substance, but I couldn't tell what it was. Frowning, I kept trying to push open the glass. Was it cracked? The surface felt rough, as if it had been damaged. What? A loud noise invaded my ears right as I got the glass unstuck. Is that the alarm? Why? Did I just break it? I never heard that sound, but it must have been the one that had played when we were trapped. I started to lose control of my nerves. What was happening? I triggered it after doing something to the cabinet, and I couldn't see what. I stood still, praying for the sound to disappear. I must have gotten locked in, but nobody was in the security room, and I'd left the storeroom door open. As I stood, I perceived a fainter and rougher sound coming from the lobby. It was the shutter closing automatically. That's okay, the other door's open. The silence came back, but I still couldn't get it together. Of course, the past had changed and the alarm had been activated before the 15th, but why? If nobody found the hidden entrance, I'd be trapped in the tower for 12 hours. Lost in the dark. I looked at the Sekimeiya, still faintly glowing. I should have had enough time to escape with it, and I didn't know if the world would return to normal on its own. I put my hand through the opening and immediately stopped. It didn't make any sense. but I was too exhausted to react. The inside of the cabinet, which should have been the coldest part of the room, was hot. In fact, as I got closer to the Sekimeiya, I felt a hot aura reminiscent of the one in the water tank. Wait, does that mean I can travel really far back again? Why though? The cabinet shouldn't allow it. I raised my hand and felt the freezing air that the cabinet was releasing. I touched the white stain on the cushion and I knew I hadn't been mistaken. Something was there. It was very hot and it felt as if something had dried on the cloth. As I moved my hand around it, I noticed it was in abundance, whatever it was. What was it? I couldn't tell, but there were also tiny pieces with a rocky texture scattered across the cushion. My fingers felt something different and tried to grab it. It was larger than the strange substance above it. What the hell is this? A card? The texture and form resembled one, but it was pretty small. I took it out of the cabinet and felt its hot touch, painfully confused. It was stained like the cushion, but I couldn't tell what it was. I grabbed my phone and shined its faint light on the object. Just like I thought, it was a very tiny card. On it, a single word was written. Shin. A chill ran down my spine. They had been there. But why? They shouldn't have attacked till the 15th. Was it as I'd feared? Had one of the members travelled from the 15th, changed history with an early attack? I stared at the Sekimeiya. Most importantly, why was it still there if Shin had already attacked? I had so many questions and no faith that any would be answered. I began to move my hand toward the glow inside the cabinet. The searing air around it was all I could be sure of. It was ridiculously hot, completely overpowering the cabinet's icy interior. My frozen hand penetrated the barrier of hot air. The temperature was all I needed to know that the Sekimeiya's energy was comparable to when it had been in the water tank. Would touching it bring back life to the world? From the 15th, I'd gone 15 days back. It didn't matter that I'd have nowhere to stay. I would have time to work all those matters out. I just had to go back in time and root out the problem by obtaining the Sekimeiya before anyone else did. My hand, cold as it was, began to burn painfully. I was so close to the Sekimeiya, and to leaving behind yet another reality. I shut my eyes, mustering up the will to move my hand further. I expected that by the next time I opened them, my surroundings would have morphed entirely. Oh man, we're inside the place again. Or still, I guess. The light had come back, but I was in the lobby. Where is this? I turned around slowly. Atsuki? You! We both looked shocked to see each other. At that time, I saw the shutter and the powered-off lights. Those are the effects of the alarm. Are you Shiroya? What? Yes, where are we? I just appeared here. I couldn't believe it was him. I thought seeing him again wasn't possible. However, the look he gave me seemed full of suspicion. His eyes were piercing mine, as he appeared wary. I felt my body and noticed my heart skip a beat. I was wearing different clothes, ones I'd washed the day before. As soon as the world had unfrozen, so had I. I could move my hand without it cramping, as if the time I'd spent outside had been erased, and when I did, I realized I wasn't tired anymore. Wait, that! I followed his eyes toward hallway B door. When I gave it a closer look, I saw the crucial detail I'd missed. The edges were dark, I'd seen it before, so I didn't have to wonder what it meant. It's the smoke, right? Yes, but doesn't it look different? What? I'm not sure where we are, I just appeared here too. As he said that, he approached the door. Unlike mine, his clothes were the ones he'd worn on the 15th, but they were clean. A sound came from hallway B. The sound that came from hallway B made Atsuki stop. A door had closed. He went still, trying to stay silent, and I did the same. A few seconds later, he kept going and grabbing the knob. When he opened the door, I couldn't believe what I saw. Oh fuck, don't breathe. What? No light filled the hallway, only a dark fog did. Without a doubt, it was the same smoke that had knocked us out, although its density seemed much lower. Right next to us were 3 people on the floor, Edina, Isla and Sai, who had all just lost consciousness. Are we on the morning of the 15th? After staring at the scene with perplexity, Atsuki's face slowly turned to me and he spoke in a quiet voice. Are you really Shiroya? The real one? What does that mean? Who else would I be? What do you remember? Please tell me everything. What? I don't know what you mean. We got trapped here and a bunch of things happened. What happened? How'd you end up here? Huh? A lot of things. Do you remember everything? Late into the day, we were in the lobby and I went to the bathroom. There I activated the Sekimeiya and appeared on the 30th of November below that gem shop. And then a few days later I entered the tower and to touch the Sekimeiya. That's how I appeared here. That was why the image my brain was receiving didn't make any sense. How could it be real? How could that have been the start of December 15th? Wait, that's all? What about appearing here after you'd gone to the bathroom? Do you remember that? What? No, I found the Sekimeiya in the toilet's water tank and went a long way into the past. Are you really the real Shinoya? I don't really understand what you're telling me. I didn't either. Had he really just appeared there at the same time as me? Did that mean that he'd been encompassed by the range of my travel? Wait a second. That sound from before was a door, right? It sounded like it came from the right wall. I think so. It must have been that one then. He pointed at one of the doors and I understood why he'd said that. That's where Naomi died, and where I travelled for the first time. If the smoke was just released, someone might have been there, just been there because it's where the temperature regulation cabinets are. I didn't know what to say, but he was the Atsuki I'd been with all day. How was I talking to him? Hadn't his existence been overwritten? We might have just heard the culprit. I have no idea why we're here, but only a few people should be conscious at this time. He gestured at me to follow him, and to not breathe. Before I could react, he was dashing toward the door, so I did the same, covering my face with an arm. While I still trailed behind, he looked at me and seemed to frown, however he ended up going through the door. Alright. Oh, wait, we'll wait till the next, start of the next paragraph. The crystal room was empty, and every cabinet had its curtain neatly in place. If the sound had come from there, someone had just left. Atsuki closed the door carefully, so that his voice wouldn't be heard. Alright, we're gonna wrap this one up here. I don't know how that happened. The Shin thing made me think that Shin had been there, stole the Sekimeiya and replaced it with a fake initially. But this is obviously not a fake, right? Or maybe it is, but it's still got magic powers or whatever, except it sent us forward in time instead of backwards, but not very far. I don't know. It's gonna take a bit of explaining to figure out that one, but I guess we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.